It is 9:30, and we want to welcome everyone to tonight's webinar, the focus of which is social integration and helping all kids make friends and fit in a really fun but intensely social circumstance like summer camp. And we are welcoming tonight's special guest, Sylvia van Meerten, who, among other wonderful things, being an author and a mom, is also an expert in the field of autism, and an expert in a really important way that we were discussing a few minutes ago, which is not theoretical, but very applied. And Sylvia, if you want to hold up your book, that would be fantastic, because to me, this is really exciting. So Happiness, Diversity, Autism, Practical Strategies for Inclusion. And you can see Sylvia collaborated with her friends Scott and Josh. Sylvia, where can people get your book if after tonight's webinar they have some more questions? We're going to talk about all kinds of kids tonight, including kids who might be on the spectrum. But for parents who are joining us and want more information on supporting in social ways and promoting social skills, where can we get that book, or camp directors who want to share it with their staff?
I will put the link up in the chat. It's on our website,
perfect.
Chasing Summer, and I put it right up.
Great. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to remove the we're going to reset that sticky, and let's put your, I want to put that link up. So it's, your website is Empower Autism.
The website for the book is chasingsummer.org.
Great. Okay. So, all right. Great. That's just going to be up there now. Yeah. All right. Fantastic. All right. Fabulous. Well, there it is. Chasingsummer.org. Let's just start with your first thoughts of some of the things that apply broadly in your role as a camp director, working with both sort of neurotypical children as well as children with all kinds of different special needs or unique challenges. What are some of the things that come to your mind in terms of both advice for parents as well as advice for camp directors as they work to train their staff? And then we'll ask people to text in questions in the chat room.
All right. Well, I think for camp directors or facilitators of groups, that one of the most important things is to make the social dynamics more discussed, more talked about, more front and center, even the awkward parts. Because often, you know, who's getting along with who and who's left out doesn't get discussed openly, and that and it's much harder to discuss once things are going wrong. So I would say in general that setting the stage, and a lot of times we're really good at this for typical kids. You know, we say in the beginning, we're going to be nice to each other. We don't do put downs. We set some of those expectations. But when you're trying to include a more neurodiverse group, then sometimes you have to be even more explicit about what you expect from people socially. Okay. And sometimes that can look very similar to your regular opening day talk. But instead of just letting people say things out loud, you might write down some of your own specific expectations. Like that you expect that people will explain a joke. If 3 people are laughing about something and there's other kids who didn't hear or don't understand, that it's the standard of your community that we explain the jokes. Or it's the standard of that we describe the standard in a more literal way. Yeah.
And so when you guys, and when I say you guys, let's say at Tall Tree, one of the camps that you direct, how long is the session for children on the spectrum?
The like initial setting the tone session.
Yeah.
We do that session as about a 30-minute check-in, and we actually do it as a diversity experience. So we start by asking the group, you know, do you want to have a diverse life? And why? And kids usually come up with really good reasons. And so far, I've never had a kid who said no. And that's been across all settings. You know, they say yes, and I ask them why, and they say because it's more interesting, and because it's boring if everybody's the same, and because we have big problems in the world and we need a lot of people's ideas. They say that, you know, brilliant answers. And then we talk about, you know, okay, that's great, but what does it feel like when you're actually next to somebody who's really different from you? For whatever reason, you know, maybe they are from another country. Maybe they look different. Maybe they're a girl or a boy, or maybe they think differently, or they're louder or standing too close or something. What does it actually feel like when somebody different is right next to you?
Yeah.
You know, are you right in that moment? Are you thinking, wow, I'm really celebrating diversity right now? And, you know, most people say no. Most people say it's a little uncomfortable when it's actually happening. And so then we can talk about that as a group. Okay, so it is uncomfortable. Let's talk about what is the same about our group here and what is different about us, what makes our group diverse. And then if nobody says, you know, some of us operate differently, or some of us are, you know, friends in a different way, or some of us think differently, then I just throw that in there to the discussion. And then we start talking about what does everybody need from the group. And it means that kids who need quiet time more often can say that they need it, or kids who, you know, have trouble falling asleep can say they need help with that. Or, you know, there's creating a platform where it's okay to need something that somebody else doesn't need is a crucial part of that first conversation for us. And I guess from the parent perspective, you know, one of the things that I really appreciate is when parents have prepared their kids to be able to say a little bit about what they need. To say, you know, not necessarily disclosing a diagnosis or explaining, you know, I don't have a lot of friends or something that would be harder to say, but to be able to say something like, I really like some quiet time during the day, or I'm the kind of person that needs you to tell me how to play a new game, or I'm the kind of person who, you know, to be prepped to say a need. And that helps us in those structured conversations as well.
Yeah. So it makes a lot of sense, you know, for the parents who are attending this webinar either live or listening to the recording that'll be posted up on the Expert Online Training YouTube channel. Some kind of preparatory conversation about making their needs met, or explaining what their needs are and discussing how they might get their needs met. Where do you come down, you know, as a camp director? I think it would be really helpful for you to offer some advice both to fellow directors as well as to parents about, you know, if part of the goal of summer camp for any kid is to promote their social skills, how far do you, or how hard do you push someone to sort of say, well, you know, I know this makes you a little bit uncomfortable. This is actually good to learn how to do this. Or I know you said that you were, you know, less comfortable in a large group, and you know, I'd like you to try to see if you can tolerate this because right now, you know, we are doing this large group activity, and it's going to be good to you know, try to habituate a little bit to what that setting is like. Obviously, we're not trying to make any kid uncomfortable, you know, to an intense degree. That's just, you know, not part of the mission of, you know, most camps. And at the same time, you know, we like to put kids in their challenge zone. So how do I know as a director, how do I know as a parent that you're sort of striking a good balance between, you know, try this even though it's a little unsettling because it'll kind of expand your repertoire of social skills or level of comfort in different environments?
Well, I mean, I think it depends a little bit on who the kid is. And if we're talking about a kid who, you know, has a diagnosis that is, you know, that the diagnosis is pretty clear and it's their first time away, I might more fall on the like on the side of let's let that kid watch first. Let's make an agreement about you're going, it's okay if you don't want to do the big group activity. Let's watch for a few minutes and then let's try it. Or, something that makes them feel like they have a better chance at winning at the activity, like winning as in not being bad at it, not being made fun of, not being wrong at it. And so watching first without having to participate right away is sometimes a really good technique for that. But if it's a kid who is maybe just a little, like a little resistant to a large group activity, or a little, like, again, usually that I find that resistance to participate is usually based on anxiety about not doing it right, that they're something they're going to do wrong. And so, and then sort of by singling them out when it's starting, we're like already making their worst fears come true. Somebody's going to come over and say, I'm doing it wrong. And then sure enough, someone does, even if it's friendly. And so I like to do much of the expectation setting in advance of the situation. And that's a very common scenario at camp, whether or not you have special needs. There's going to be some kid that doesn't want to play the big extrovert game. And it's usually the kid that's like a quieter kid anyway, and might more want to do activities with just one or two people. And so I think you can address it either way, that either you can plan for that to happen and have activities that are 1 or 2 person or 3 person activities that are perfectly acceptable and still supervised in the same area. Or you say in advance to all your kids, there might be a time where you don't want to do something, and I'm just going to tell you right now, this is the appropriate thing to do. You can watch first, or you can like sit along the side and make up your own activity. Or I'm probably going to come over and try to get you to do it. You can just level with them about what will happen. That's pretty much going to happen to every counselor every summer in every cabin. So I guess,
go ahead.
I also think that a lot of times the underlying anxiety is one of the big reasons why we see some of that, like not the kind of not easy social behavior. It is based on anxiety. And I think a lot of times that anxiety is alleviated again by preparation and by explaining what will happen before it happens.
I think, we've had a couple of questions from participants about, wait a second, is this webinar for, just parents and directors of summer youth programs that know they have kids with different abilities or special needs, or is it for everyone? And you basically just answered that question. I mean, I think that all people, not just young people, benefit from some preparatory information. I mean, last time you flew on a plane, that's like the first thing they tell you is like, hey, this flight is going to Atlanta. So if that's not part of your travel plans, you may want to, get off the plane now. And, I always thought that was the most ridiculous, most basic orienting piece of information. And so they actually got up out of their seat the last flight I was on back to Boston. And I'm thinking to myself, how do they even, because you have to scan the barcode. How do they get past that? But, it happened. So look, the sort of orienting, starting at a basic level, helpful to everyone, especially someone who might be anxious, not knowing exactly what's coming up next. And that really, that's not unique to kids with autism spectrum disorder. I think people vary a great deal by temperament. Some of us are fine with sort of a little bit of chaos or not knowing exactly what's going to happen next. And other people want a little more certainty and become a little bit more anxious if there isn't a plan. So this technique of spelling things out, expectations, and I loved what you said at the beginning of being really explicit about what the community parameters are for communication and really talking about thoughts and feelings, because, for all young people, these are developing skills. And if some of the boys and girls we work with who have autism are are struggling a bit more with, imputing mental states to other people and inferring their thoughts and feelings. A technique such as, hey, we like to joke around at camp. We enjoy people with, a great sense of humor. If you have an appropriate joke to tell, that's great. And the standard in this community is we also explain the joke at the end in case anyone is wondering. And again, I think that's great for all kids. And I think also that your description of offering options reminds me of a new program that I helped to start at the camp where I've worked for several decades, which is Camp Belknap in central New Hampshire here. And we moved our arts and crafts program away from kit-based activities where kids would sort of open up a plastic bag, put some things together, and then, in a few minutes be bored, to woodworking, which is a lot of fun. It sounds good. It smells good. It's, it feels good on your hands, and it's just really cool. And, it takes some skill, but I think that's what engaged kids. And when I introduced the first project that we did literally on the first day of camp, on the first session, I think sort of true to one dimension of my personality, I was describing all the details, and you got to measure this out. And this is, and it was something fairly simple, but, the kids were listening and they did the best they could with the projects, but I didn't see a lot of smiling. I didn't hear a lot of laughter. And the second week, when a new group of kids was there and I was explaining the project, one of the things I did was show some of the variations that people had. So this was like a little shelf that you could put a pine cone or a candle on, just sort of a little memorabilia shelf. And the coolest thing happened, which was when I showed that, well, you could do it this way, or like, hey, this one wasn't cut straight, but look at what happened, and that's so cool. Or you could angle this, or someone decided to do that. And people didn't feel constrained anymore. They felt like they had a choice. And suddenly there was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of smiling and a lot of sharing, like, hey, let me hold this while you do that. The whole like atmosphere of the wood shop changed. And I think I have thought about that in months, but to hear you describe how much it reduces people's anxiety to A, know what's coming up, B, have some choices, and C, some expectations for what you as the supervisor or youth leader is probably going to do. Like, I'm probably going to come over and ask you to join in. It lays it out, which I think is fantastic. And again, for all kids, I see great value in some of those techniques.
And, I also think that there's a lot of different kinds of kids who come to camp who aren't necessarily our, the loud, super social, dress up in a costume, be silly kind of kid. And, we don't plan a lot of activities on purpose for kids who like to do things in groups of 2 or 3. We don't plan a lot of things on purpose for kids who, like to just who like to read, or who like to, recreate in this way that is sort of like more adult, that they're already doing it. We sort of discourage it at camp. Like, no, you can't sit in the cabin and read your book. And then, meanwhile, as parents, we're like, I wish they would just sit and read.
Right.
So I think that there's a certain amount of planning that camp professionals can do that is like friendly to kids who are more introverted, and that it's still social. And one of the other things that I've been wanting to incorporate at our programs that are more integrated, that have, kids that have neurotypical kids and some kids with diagnoses, is a buddy system. In a cabin. So a cabin of 8 kids also has a buddy system for, either the whole week or half the week. And there's a little job description for buddies. What do buddies do? Buddies sit together at lunch, and buddies invite their buddy into what they're doing. So if you're playing something and you see your buddy, part of your job description is to invite your buddy in to do the thing with you. Maybe there's like a nighttime check-in with your buddy or whatever. But to sort of encourage a one-to-one friendship, so that one-to-one friendship can then bridge to the larger group. But sometimes kids aren't ready for that intensely nuanced social thing of a group of 8, but they might be ready to do a job description for being a buddy for one kid. And then it also allows a kid who is more social to have permission to include a kid who's not as social without worrying that they're going to be sort of like that will be too weird, because it's their job to do it. You're kind of giving everyone permission to do it.
And so do the kids write? So this is getting into what my next set of questions was going to be about, helping all kids make friends at camp. In the sort of buddy program that you're describing, would the kids write their own buddy job description?
Well, I wrote them when we did this before. But I think that's a cool idea, or at least to maybe add something like to add to them. I want my buddy to add to it, because we wanted to structure it so that there were so it was like pretty simple, so that you don't have to remind everyone all the time. So we put in those parts about like sit together at lunch and invite your buddy into what you're doing, were the 2 things on the job description. Okay. But I think that's a really cool idea. But we put them in like little envelopes, like it was like an invitation to having a buddy. Like it was it's like a whole ceremony of things. Like you got your buddy, you got your job description, you you introduced your buddy to the group. It was like an opening day thing.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And what other things do you think help all kids, whether they have some symptoms, on the autism spectrum or are more neurotypical, and all of those kids also, as you pointed out, with different temperaments, some a little more introverted, classically, really enjoying some of the solitary time, some really grooving on other people's energy. What are some of the things that you've seen as a parent, as a camp professional, that help kids connect and make new friends?
I think there's a couple of things that I think are sort of broad, and then a couple of really specific things. And one of the broad ones is to, as a parent, to spend some time playing some stuff with your kid pretty often. Play with them, not necessarily as a like, I got out the stuff for you, now you do it. But play something with them, whether it's a game that they're making up or a thing that they like to go do in their room. Like get in there and see what's happening, and then see what would it be like if you tried to play something else. Like be like, if you and your kid don't play catch, see if you can like make that happen. Like see what it would be like for them or for another kid to try to engage your kid. And
all right. So the adult in this scenario is picking something that the kid doesn't usually do.
Yeah. And not necessarily to force it to like, to make them actually play catch, but just to like see what it would be like, see what they say, see if they seem a little interested, and then see what they do respond to, what overtures of yours they do respond to, and then what did they do during the play? Because that gives you a baseline for helping kids who aren't making friends and who aren't connecting. It helps you figure out where's the area that is confusing. Is it that they need to only play what they're playing, that they only want to do what they know how to do? Is it that they don't know how to do a turn taking, scenario? Where's the issue? And you don't know if you're just trying to like spy on them playing with other kids if they don't usually do it, So
right. Yeah.
And because it's practice, if it's a regular routine to play something with you, then it's still practice, even if it's not playing with other kids. Right. And then another one I would say is to, have do some like prepping and planning with your, as a parent, planning with your kid about, what will they do when and if things are awkward with another kid? And this is true even for kids who are really social, is that now, kids are always coming in contact with like socially difficult scenarios. And sometimes they don't, we don't do a lot of prep and planning for like logistically, what will they do? What if, for some kids who have trouble making friends, one of those early issues is that they're perceiving teasing where there isn't teasing. That they think, and what will they do if as a parent, this is a problem? They're always coming home talking about somebody said something, but for sure, like it wasn't, they aren't really they're just misinterpreting it. So making a plan with them, like, what can you say to ask? Can you go, if you think somebody's teasing you, then in a safe environment like camp where it's pretty supervised and pretty like gentle, then can you go and be like, were you making fun of me? Or did you mean to hurt my feelings? Like, what is the phrase that works for your kid that they could practice so that when that happens, they can do the plan instead of escalating or instead of it hurting their feelings quietly forever or whatever it is. Like, what will they do when things go wrong? Because if you're not social very often, then things probably will go wrong when you try.
Right. So that's fascinating. And do you find that when parents do this preparation for the invariable or inevitable awkward moment, when kids ask those questions like, hey, did you mean to make fun of me just then? Are the other kids fairly candid?
Yeah, I found that they really are, because I coach kids to do this at camp a lot. Like, oh, you thought, like, what is going on? Like, you're all upset. What's going on? Like, oh, he said something. He was mean to me. He called me this. I'm like, oh, like, did he? Well, let's go find out if he meant to hurt your feelings. Like, let's just go ask. And then we go over, and usually the kid's like, no, I was just saying that. Or they're like, yeah, well, he blankety blank. And then all of a sudden now you're in a like conflict resolution situation that's pretty standard for camp. But that before that, just talking to one kid about their perception and not involving the other kid just kind of promotes that lonely feeling of like, you can only work things out with you and an adult because you didn't have a plan for how to go find out from the other kid what's going on.
Right.
And in some ways, even for kids who don't have a diagnosis, I favor this approach because, as we get older, it becomes more and more necessary to be able to ask, like, that hurt my feelings. Is that what you were going for? That hurt my feelings. What can we do about it? And if you don't have any practice saying that, then when that moment comes, it's like, takes your breath away instead of being something you were ready for. And there aren't any adults who haven't gotten their feelings hurt. And so it isn't something that we can just pretend won't happen to your kid, because it happens to everybody.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. And Tink's just written 2 great ideas right there. Thank you. I echo Tink's sentiment. It's also, as you said, all of us have had our feelings hurt. And I think one of the wonderful things about teaching any child to ask about another child's intent and, having practice with your parent makes it a, safer, at least launching pad. And when you get to camp, you're comfortable asking that question. I think that leads to then another kind of higher level social, a higher level of social awareness where, you and I are having a conversation, you say something and, I realize, oh, that hurt my feelings. And I can just kind of based on experience or the history of our relationship at some point say, hey, Sylvia, I'm certain that you didn't intend to hurt my feelings. I'm sensitive about this. And, I'm just thinking to myself, that's not an easy thing to do. Even if it's a close friend, be like, hey, whoa, that kind of, that right there, that's a button, right?
It's not easy, but in some ways it's easier if a counselor type is like, let's go ask. And then I don't always make the kid do it. Like, do you have something to say? I
Right, right.
I kind of bridge it. Like, it seems like there's some kind of misunderstanding, and somebody's feelings got hurt, and then I'll sort of like bridge and be like, did you want to ask, or is it okay if I, kind of, and then I might be like, I think that, like, he might have got his feelings hurt because of something you said, but we're like that. I'm pretty sure you weren't trying to do that. Can we figure out what happened? And then it kind of opens it up for them to talk to each other. Because I agree with you. I mean, the saying something hurt your feelings is it's hard as a, supposedly emotionally mature adult.
Which we both are. I mean, come on, right?
Obviously.
Well, it was one of the best clinical experiences that I ever had at the school where I work. One of the very first students that I worked with when I started my job in the fall of 1999, really brilliant kid who had some social challenges and what we used to call Asperger's disorder. So people probably, if they spent some time with this person, would have said, yeah, little kind of maybe a little bit socially awkward, but also extremely talented and fun to be with and so forth. And I remember his parents coming to meet with me, and they said, like, don't be surprised, Dr. Thurber, even if the door is closed and the little sign on the outside says "in session," if he just comes in. And I was really sort of taken aback by that, and I said something very neutral, like, "Oh, okay, thanks for the warning." Anyway, fast forward a week, sure enough, and fortunately, I wasn't with another student at the time, but he just came right in, and I remembered the parents' comments, and I said, so, the way that I really like to have students arrive is either to wait in the waiting room if the sign says "in session," because that probably means I'm with another student or I'm on the phone and I'll come find you. Or if the sign says, what it says right now, which when we have the little slider, it goes from "in session" to "please knock." So I pointed out the sign to him, and all along I thought, oh, I'm being so kind of explicit here, but it worked. And not only was he grateful, like, oh, thanks for telling me. It was just kind of, it was a thing. Like, I realized nobody, including his parents, had, at least recently, said to him, hey, you're so smart. This is a social convention. This is something that you need to do. So anyway, it just it was an example of what you said near the beginning of our conversation, stating an expectation, not making assumptions about the level of the person's understanding, or not making anything implicit, just in a very kind way saying, hey, for me, this is what I like. If the door is closed and it says "please knock," go ahead and knock, and I'll come to the door if I'm in the office, and otherwise, have a seat in the waiting room. We're not, even though it might be a little bit uncomfortable, and again, for parents, for camp directors, for the counselors who are attending this webinar, to be that explicit or say how somebody's behavior makes you feel, we're not doing them any favors by hiding it or by not saying it, right? I mean, you want to advance somebody's social skills or make it easier for them to make friends, you're going to have to give some of this commentary and, as you said, coach them through a little bit of practice, right?
Yeah. And I've found that kids, with and without a diagnosis, are so grateful to have some of that underlying social stuff brought to the forefront, because I think it's very stressful to be a young person in a new environment, especially an environment like camp, where the social roles are different and the way you conduct yourself is different. The dining hall is its own subculture and a different one in every camp. And we try to pretend like kids will just pick it up, but it makes everybody really nervous not to know how they're supposed to act and what the traditions are. And so I find that when we do bring it up, especially the big ones, like that, we have a cabin of people of different races, and we might have a transgender camper, and maybe people don't want to talk about all the issues, and we don't have to talk about it all on the first day or a way that makes people uncomfortable. But when we practice not talking about things, it's sort of like saying behaviorally that it's okay to pretend that awkwardness doesn't exist, or it's okay to pretend like that, you know, racism doesn't exist, or it's okay to pretend like people are not left out. And it just, and I think it's not fair, especially at camp where we've done all this work to make it emotionally emotionally giving place, a place where kids are supposed to be accepted. It's such a waste of it to never discuss anything like that.
Yeah.
And
that's so beautifully put.
I also think that for our staff, that it's really good personal development to have to own a statement like, you know, I want you to blank, or here's what I'd like to see happen. That those kind of bold statements like that are the way that you build your life to be what you want. And so like, it isn't just a service you're doing to a person with autism or a person who doesn't understand where you're coming from socially to tell them, but it's also a service to yourself, because the more you can say what you want, the more likely it is that you might get it. And that we, in couples counseling, we spend a lot of time with a couple saying, you know, it seems like there's something you want here, but you aren't saying it. Let's practice. Or it seems like there's something you expected for years that you didn't say. Like, let's try saying it. So I don't think that it's something we're like condescending to do. I feel like it's important work for ourselves just to say what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, I mean, again, all of this is so applicable, I think, to all healthy relationships. We've got 5 or so minutes left, and I'm keen to share any other things that you've seen work well to help kids connect in a camp setting. We're all wanting kids to, enjoy themselves, learn new things, but we know what they'll keep with them the longest are the friendships.
Right.
How else do those bonds form? How else can we nurture those social connections in all kids?
Well, one thing is just purely logistical, and that's that in our application process, we have a box people can tick that says we can share your child's name and phone number with the other kids in their cabin, like the 10 kids in their cabin. And then if they did agree to it, we give out this list, like just to their cabin, like those 10 kids have each other's phone numbers or their whatevers, depending on how old they are, social media or whatever, that their parent gave permission for it, so that the kid leaves with the contact information. So that essentially, as a parent, that, one of our main jobs as parents is to help be the like social broker for our kids, that if they got along with another kid, that we help them continue the friendship. And so but it's really hard to do after camp if your kid's like, I loved, Daniel in my cabin. And then you're like, well, who's Daniel? Like, he could be anyone. Right. And and then if you're a busy parent, having to pick up the phone and call a camp and be like, can I have a different kid's phone number? Like, that's awkward. And then, it just makes it all so much more regular, just to be like, here's the kids, here's their phone numbers. And then sometimes we would have, if we knew a kid struggled, we might write a little note on theirs, like it was this kid that they got along with, so the parent knows, who to talk to.
Is there a way that let me just interrupt and ask, any way that you get kids connected or families connected prior to opening day?
We haven't done that, although sometimes for new, like parents who are new to camp, sometimes we'll connect them with a parent who's been to camp before. But we haven't really done it with kids, but that's a really good idea. And doing a mixer beforehand would be really great too. But I think as far as tips for parents for helping their kids connect, I think that one of the most powerful things that you can do is to bring your kid to participate in things that they like. And if that, even, if that means a pottery class or finding a Minecraft group where the other kids are also playing Minecraft, especially for kids who are more introvert or more analytical, they're going to showcase their content, like the things they know, the things they're interested in. And so for their whole life, and that's what they'll connect with people about. And so
that's the social currency.
Right. That's their social currency. And so they have to build it by doing it more. And so finding ways for them to explore their interests socially or not, or alone, will still be helping them towards a future of a happier, more connected life. That it isn't okay, you have to put your video game down because you have to go and connect with people. Because a lot of kids do connect over playing video games. So find a way to make that happen. Or, art or whatever it is to go with what they already like and see if there's some kind of connection they can make with kids in it.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. If a kid were, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If a kid were really good at a video game, but the day camp or overnight camp didn't allow video games, parents, I hope, are familiarizing themselves with the policies. What would you say to a kid, or how could you find an alternate, an interesting, skill, something they can bring to the table and share with another kid?
Well, I guess I think that to some degree it depends on the kid, but a lot of times kids will have an interest or something that they enjoy talking about, even if it isn't something that's at camp.
Yeah.
And so sometimes trying to set up as a camp person, camp staff, trying to set up times in some of those unstructured social times to set up short, sharing activities. So, even a short, teach each other, everybody has 2 minutes to teach the group about something they know. We're going to start it, or 3 kids that are let's do a short, teach and question, just let, we're here together with people who are different from us. Let's find out what people know. 2 minutes is a painless amount of time to listen to something, even if you don't care about it,
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. And I love that suggestion because it's not at all equipment based.
Right.
You're telling them about an interest, or even if someone is really into video games, they might say, well, I like to play Minecraft, and one of the cool things that I like to do is, set up, my son loves to build in Minecraft a little pen for the sheep, and it's just, we all just crack up. It's one of the things that I love about Minecraft is in the kind of creative mode, and you're not really competing against anyone. You can do some pretty hilarious things.
Totally.
It's great, and you can describe that to someone. So.
Yeah. And, a lot of times we find that when kids do that, that it's an unlikely other kid who thinks it's awesome, that
right.
You didn't know that, but so-and-so who's the social butterfly kid is you can do that. They're taking notes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, it's fantastic. You've given us lots of great suggestions. And before we wrap up for tonight, was there anything that you wanted to make sure to share with camp professionals or with parents, or maybe with people who, like you, are both? Well,
I guess what I think is that I think that approaching the idea of diversity, if you are a camp person, approaching the idea of diversity first, early on in the session, so that when people are acting differently, you have something to reference about, oh yeah, well, you remember we talked about people are going to be different and it might make you feel uncomfortable at first, but you said that you wanted to do it. You said it was worth it. So let's try, and then that is so much easier to have that conversation then when you have something to reference than to have to do it all at the time and kids see right through it. Right. They're oh, you're talking about so-and-so or whatever. So I think it's not worth skipping that part and hoping you can just like patch it with like small interventions. And I would say for parents that that feeling like, you know, you want to protect your kid from an environment that's too highly social, or like you want them to be good at their social repertoire before they go to a group or a class or a camp, I think is like comes from a good place. It comes from a like protective place. And I have felt like that about my stepson who's on the spectrum. But I don't, I think that being brave and risking your kid going to camp especially is so worth it, because it's safe, you know, or that like it's a lot safer than emotionally than a lot of other environments, and that it's worth practicing, especially like young, to go and just be with a bunch of people, even if they're not making good friends, even if they're being awkward, that they still come back knowing a lot more than they did, but that waiting till they get good to start practicing doesn't make sense when you think about it that way.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating to put myself at opening day for the camp where I've worked, you know, now for 33 summers and was a camper for 3 summers, and think about what we'll be inserting now, thanks to your words of wisdom, that will set up, I think, all of the campers and staff for better, more comfortable social connections. And as you said, when the inevitable tension occurs or awkward moment occurs or opportunity presents itself to, you know, teach better social skills or be explicit about how you're thinking or what you're feeling, you have that, as you said, you have that as a reference. And to be able to talk about what was established as an expectation at the beginning of the session or the summer with regard to respect and the appreciation of the differences that exist in any group, right?
And we actually do that initial conversation as a visual too. We do it up on a poster board so that we see like the sections, like what's the same about our group, what's different about our group, and what's our plan for being a diverse group. And it's just up in the cabin, like in place of the opening day expectations kind of thing. We have that up in the cabin.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fantastic. I'm going to put up again the link to chasingsummer.org/store and let people know that recording of this webinar, which has just been an incredibly enlightening conversation, will be up on 2 places, on my channel, which is Dr. Chris Thurber on YouTube, as well as on the Expert Online Training channel. So we have unfortunately reached the end of our time, and I want to say a couple of things to our attendees and those who are watching this as a recording. First of all, Sylvia, thank you so much for being our special guest and sharing some of your experience and wisdom and expertise.
Always a pleasure talking to you, Chris.
The webinars are part of a series called WISER Cracks. You see the little poster behind me that is co-produced and co-sponsored by Expert Online Training. And for those of you who don't know, Expert Online Training is a website that contains a library of educational resources for youth development professionals. The centerpiece of that library is a collection of video training modules, 10 to 15-minute videos on topics in leadership, supervision, youth development and behavior, mental health, and safety. Sylvia van Meerten is one of our original faculty members, and she's done some wonderful videos that put staff in a much better position to promote the social development of kids who might have some symptoms of autism spectrum disorder or have a diagnosis or are neurotypical kids. And you've gotten some great examples of those things from Sylvia tonight. So check out expertonlinetraining.com. If you're a parent, ask your child's camp director, do you use expertonlinetraining.com to help teach your staff? There are some free full-length sample videos up on the site so you can see what we do. And if you're a camp director, check out expertonlinetraining.com as a tool to supplement your on-site training. There is no substitute for on-site training of staff and all of the customized material that is specific to your day camp, overnight camp, or summer youth program. But no director has their staff on site for long enough to cover everything that they would like to and fully equip their staff. So Expert Online Training works in concert with your on-site training and is also a wonderful resource during the season, during the summer. And speaking of resources, Sylvia, I'll ask you to hold your book up one more time because it's exciting that this just got published. Happiness, Diversity, Autism, Sylvia, Scott, and Josh. And if you click on the link that's up there, chasingsummer.com/store, you can get your own copy or a copy for each person on your staff. I highly recommend it. And that's not just talk. I actually read it. And it's really cool. When I was in graduate school, I got to work with young children with autism, with Down syndrome, Fragile X, and some other things, and really gained an appreciation for the neurodiversity that exists in the world. I also realized, because I was working in camp then as well, there were virtually no resources to equip me or any other camp staff to work with kids who had some of these symptoms. So thank goodness for Sylvia's book. And please get your hands on a copy, because whether you're a camp or youth program for kids with different abilities or diagnoses, you will invariably benefit from the content in this book. As Sylvia said, we all have our awkward moments, and I think we're all continuously developing socially. So many of the things that are in that book are broadly applicable. Sylvia, any closing thoughts or words before we wrap things up for tonight?
No, I really appreciate being invited. I had a great time.
Awesome. All right. Well, folks, we're really glad you joined us. And if you'd like to learn more, you can certainly click on the links we've provided. And Sylvia, I hope you'll come back and we'll talk some more on a future webinar.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Bye-bye.
All right. Cool. All right. Good night, everybody. Take care.